Imagine being a teenage princess, dressed in silk and jewels, riding toward a palace where you'll be crowned queen. The music plays, the crowds cheer, and history will remember your name. But beneath the gold and ceremony lurks a far darker truth. That night, behind the heavy oak doors of a royal chamber, the real trial begins. The crown may look like glory, but the bed could mean pain, humiliation, or even death. This is why medieval queens truly feared their wedding nights. Marriage in the Middle Ages was never about love. It was politics, alliances, and power. A king didn't care if his bride was terrified. What mattered was heirs, heirs, and more heirs. A queen was valued not for her wisdom or beauty, but for her ability to bear sons. That first night when the marriage was consummated was not just a private matter. It was a public obligation, and everyone was watching, waiting, whispering. For many noble women, their wedding night began in childhood. Royal brides could be as young as 12, even 10. Imagine a child barely old enough to play with dolls, suddenly told she was ready to share a bed with a man twice or 3 times her age. Catherine of Aragon, sent from Spain to England to marry Prince Arthur, was only 15. Margaret Beaufort, mother of Henry VII, was 13 and heavily pregnant. Her body so small that childbirth nearly killed her. In an age without modern medicine, one wedding night could end a queen's story before it had even begun. But the danger wasn't only physical. The wedding bed was a stage. In some kingdoms, nobles actually witnessed the consummation. They didn't necessarily sit and stare, but they would escort the couple into the chamber, tuck them into bed, and sometimes remain close enough to ensure the duty was done. A queen couldn't refuse, couldn't hide, couldn't say no. Her body was evidence, and her cries, whether of fear or pain, were irrelevant to the politics of the realm. Once morning came, the queen's sheets might be inspected for blood, a gruesome sign of proof that she was pure before the marriage. If no proof appeared, rumors spread like wildfire. Whispers of adultery, betrayal, or infertility could destroy her reputation. One failed wedding night could topple entire dynasties. Queens also knew that their husbands often treated them as breeding stock. The king might already have mistresses, women he truly loved or at least enjoyed. The queen was the state's womb. Her worth was measured in pregnancies, and each night in bed was a reminder that her survival depended on producing a son. Failure meant exile to a convent, or worse, the headsman's axe. Just ask Anne Boleyn. Even for queens who were lucky enough to survive childbirth, the endless cycle of pregnancies was terrifying. Childbearing in the Middle Ages was one of the leading causes of death for women. Infection, bleeding, miscarriages, stillbirths. Every pregnancy was a gamble. Every wedding night was the first roll of the dice in a deadly game she could not quit. And then there was the psychological torment. Imagine being sent from your family, your country, your language, to lie beside a man who was often a stranger. Catherine de' Medici, married off to Henry of France, arrived to find herself locked in a triangle with her husband and his mistress, Diane de Poitiers. She was humiliated from the start, forced to submit to a man who openly loved someone else. Every night in that royal bed was a reminder that her feelings, her fears, her humanity, none of it mattered. Some queens tried to fight back. Eleanor of Aquitaine, fiery and rebellious, refused to be just another royal pawn. She eventually sought annulments and wielded power in her own right. But even she was not spared the humiliation of being examined, judged, and gossiped about. Others, like Isabella of France, turned against their husbands entirely, plotting revolts and betrayals in revenge for their suffering. Still, the system never changed. For centuries, queens trembled as their wedding nights approached, knowing that history books would not record their fear, only their fertility. Their screams were silenced by the walls of palaces, their stories buried beneath the grandeur of tapestries and jewels. So next time you see a painting of a radiant medieval queen in her coronation robes, remember the part you don't see. The terrified girl, dragged into a chamber where politics and intimacy collided in the most brutal way imaginable. Behind every royal crown was a night of dread. Behind every dynasty was a woman forced into silence. History celebrates their titles, but it rarely tells us their truth. The truth that queens feared the wedding bed more than the battlefield, that their bodies were weapons and their wedding nights were wars. If you found this story as haunting as I did, don't forget to subscribe for more hidden, dark, and untold stories from history. Because sometimes the most shocking battles aren't fought with swords. They're fought in silence, in shadows, and in the beds of queens.